Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're going to wait for everybody to join us this evening. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. You can feel free to go to our chat box to say hello and let us know where you're joining in from today. Welcome. I see we have folks from Brazil, Scotland, all over. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Right. We'll get started in a minute. Welcome, welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. In the meantime, feel free to go to our chat box, say hello, and let us know where you're joining in from today. Hillary loves the subway, so do we. Right. Welcome, everybody. All right. Let's give it one more minute and then we will begin. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kendra, and I am the Public Programs Manager at the New York Transit Museum. This evening's program is part of our Transit After Hours series, where we bring a series of conversations, presentations, workshops, and performances to you all, inspired by the museum's collections and exhibitions. So before we start this evening's program, I'd like to tell you a bit more about the Transit Museum, just in case you haven't visited us before. So we opened in 1976 as part of the bicentennial of the US as the New York City Transit Exhibition. We became the Transit Museum in the 1980s. We're located in a decommissioned IND or independent subway station in downtown Brooklyn. We have a gallery and shop in Grand Central Terminal and programs for all ages. And in a non-pandemic year, we serve over 500,000 people a year. So I would also like to quickly add that if you would like closed captions this evening and you're on a computer, you can click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen, which is below the CC button, and select show subtitle. If you're on a phone or tablet, you can turn on captioning by clicking more and then meeting settings. We also invite you to use a Q&A function to ask questions throughout the program. And now I will briefly introduce our panelists from the firm Work & Co. So we have Nick Bethlehem, Senior Product Manager, Karina Siakera, Associate Design Director, and Robert Penner, Associate Engineering Director. So after Nick, Karina, and Robert's presentation, we'll have time for Q&A. So the chat tends to get a bit busy. So I really encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A function, because that's what I'll be reading from this evening. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Nick to start the presentation.
Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us this evening and taking the time to learn more about our partnership with the MTA. Now, the MTA collaborated with us on launching the digital subway map because Work & Co is specialized in doing one thing, and that's creating successful digital products. Now, what is a digital product? And the easy answer is it's anything with a screen. They are the things that all of you use every day and really can't imagine your lives without, especially now during this pandemic. And over the past 8 years, we've grown to about 400 people across offices in Brooklyn, Portland, Brazil, Europe. And what's really distinguished us in our focus is that we've actually been pretty successful in getting those products out into the world, into the hands of people to use every day, and hopefully making their lives a little bit easier, and if we're lucky, a little bit better. So Work & Co's headquarters are in Brooklyn, and so many of us at the company, including Karina, Robert, and myself, are super familiar with riding the subways. And we were genuinely invested in improving that experience, not just for ourselves, but for everybody in New York and for the MTA. So here are just a couple examples of some other digital products that we've launched recently. We've done everything from e-commerce to working with airlines, media, and the auto industry, and of course, now the MTA. And as you can see, our clients are really across the spectrum. The through line is that focus that we have on translating business and user needs into something usable, and being able to find and fill the skill gaps for our clients that don't necessarily have, the things that we do really well in-house. And then something that's really important to understand about the project we did with the MTA specifically is that it was 100% pro bono. And we were able to do that because of the Work & Co Fund, which we created and exists to support projects that our team members are really excited about and that are going to have a positive impact on the world. A few other examples of projects that have been possible because of the Work & Co Fund include a chatbot that we built with Planned Parenthood and a new database called Give Black that is a hub for Black-founded nonprofits, and Emilio, a criminal justice technology company that's building free communication tools to help break the link between prison and profits. So Work & Co has always strived to work on the projects that meant the most to its employees. And through the Work & Co Fund, we've been able to take on even more work that we really, really care about. And when it comes to the MTA, every year the company surveys the employees about the projects that they care about the most. And year in and year out, the MTA was at the top of that list. So when we finally got the opportunity through the MTA and the Transit Innovation Partnership, when they approached us about actually working on something together, we knew that we had to do it. But the truth is that even though our organizations complemented each other so well, the opportunities for collaboration were almost overwhelming. When you think about the MTA's 20-something different train lines, hundreds of stations, millions of daily passengers, and a subway system whose service is constantly changing, it wasn't completely clear to anyone on the onset as to where Work & Co could deliver the biggest impact. So to get started, we focused on what we did know. Now, here's the map that I think a lot of us will recognize as the map. And one of the first insights that both we and the MTA were aware of wasn't anything to do with the design or the pros and cons of the way this map was executed, but it was just the fact that it was printed. And for a subway system as complex and ever-changing as the MTA's, as soon as this map left the printer, in a way it was wrong, or at least incomplete, because it couldn't capture all the changes that were happening every single day. And that had nothing to do with the design choices that were made when it came to this map. And the only way to mitigate those information gaps was to just constantly print additional information. as we all know, or at least those of us in the audience that ride the subway every day, we're super familiar with printouts like this that are plastered all over the place. And not only are they difficult to understand and read through and to kind of put together with the announcements you're hearing over the loudspeaker, but they suffer from the exact same limitation as the map. The moment they're printed, there's a chance that they become inaccurate because something else has changed that day in terms of how trains are running. So none of these are exactly new problems, and they are inherent to information design. So to figure out what we're going to do about it and to inform our solutions going forward, we need to understand the history of what got us here and the choices that influenced the fact that these things exist today. So before there was the MTA, different subway lines were being developed by different private companies. And each company would, develop their own maps. And as the system grew and got interconnected, there was almost like a cottage industry of private designers creating unofficial unified maps of the different subway lines and how they intersected. These here are just 3 examples, but something that is common across all of these maps is that they prioritized geographic accuracy over systemic clarity, or making it easy to read which station's which train belongs to which red or blue line. So with the formation of the MTA in 1965, there came the impetus to really unify the wayfinding and system navigation tools that were available to riders. So in 1966, Massimo Vignelli, there on the left, and Bob Norda on the right, both of which worked at Unimark International, which was widely recognized as the design consultancy at the time, or at least it was on its way to becoming the top design consultancy at the time. Anyway, they were contracted to develop that system for the MTA. And the scope of the project was massive, and it went well beyond just updating the map and included everything from updating street level signage to the in-station wayfinding. And the scope makes sense, to make sure that regardless of where a rider is in their journey, you wanted to make sure that the right communication, the right information was being given to them at the right time, and that it was consistent from point A to point B. So in 1968, they launched the signage. And as you can see from these 2 images, one of the basic principles was trying to simplify and clarify what information is being shown to a rider, at the ideal time. So, you will even recognize this image on the right. It's super close to what you even see in the city today. The only difference is that the background's black now instead of white like it is here. And that sort of clarity of information and simplification carried on throughout what you see once you get inside the station. So this is an example of what the signage looked like prior to the update. And for all of you that are still riding the subway, you know what the signs look like today. So this process of simplification and understanding human behavior and what people needed at any point of their journey is actually analogous to what Working Code does with digital products in general, and definitely what we did for the MTA. So this image here, this is an example of a study that Unimark made where they tracked actual, rider flows through the subway, and they started plotting the different types of signs that they would need and the different roles that those signs had in terms of what information they shared based on where a rider was in the subway and what sort of decisions they may be trying to make at that point. This is almost identical to what we did for the digital subway map, and that process of observing human behavior and then mapping solutions to where the user and business needs kind of intersect. That's not only just the point of user-centered design, it is everything that we do to come up with the digital products that we create. And as a product manager, this is really one of my favorite parts of the job. Doing that research, identifying the problems that we're trying to solve, and then playing around with different solutions until you find something that feels really great. And what we learned for subway riders in the MTA is that the goal is trying to find that sweet spot between clarity of information and scalability to handle all of the unexpected and really complicated changes for that train system. And the challenge of finding that sweet spot is really best understood in the context of the subway map itself, because the map has to capture the entire system all at once. So Massimo Vignelli, he's credited with the creation of the map under Unimark, but of course he didn't do all that work alone. And it was actually Joan Cherison, who's photographed here, who did the majority of the design execution and studies that made the Vignelli diagram possible. Joan actually continued to develop the subway map for the MTA even after Vignelli departed Unimark, and she continued to work with the MTA on maps as a freelancer and consultant throughout her life. So together, they landed here. This is the first finished version of that diagram that Massimo Vignelli and Joan designed. And it took a lot of influence from London's Underground map, which was designed by Harry Beck. And unlike the geographic maps that we were looking at before, the revolutionary idea and the endlessly debated idea of this diagram is that it prioritized describing the system. And to do that, they kind of abstracted it from real life. And the hypothesis is kind of, why does it matter where exactly the train goes geographically if all I need to know is, does this train stop at X station? But of course it does matter, where the train's going geographically, because most people don't have the entire city mapped in their head. And after you exit a station, you need to know, you need to know if that station's close to where you're trying to go. And the truth is, this diagram was designed kind of under the assumption that there would be geographic and neighborhood maps that would connect the dots that the diagram couldn't. Now, for whatever reason, the MTA ended up only commissioning the diagram and they didn't develop those other maps. So as much as the diagram does a great job of telling you, which train will get you to which station, and it does a good job of kind of showing the relationship between different train lines and how they intersect at stations, it doesn't really do anything for you if you don't know how to get the rest of the way. So the city lived with just that diagram for 7 years, which all things considered is a pretty long time, but we know that during that time, there was a lot of controversy about that diagrammatic map. And during those 7 years, John Tornak, pictured here on the left, did some intense lobbying within the MTA. He was a cartographer to update the map to make it more user-friendly, and kind of ignited a strong rivalry with Massimo Vignelli and his approach to the diagram. And after 7 years, he was finally given the latitude to make a version of the map that was his own. And so he enlisted Michael Hertz Associates to help him. That's that group of folks there on the right. And Michael Hertz, he's the guy third bottom from the left. So together, they created this version of the map, which is basically the same version that we recognize as the map today. And this image here, what it captures is, beyond creating something that was more geographically accurate, the really revolutionary idea that they came up with was combining all the disparate train lines that they could into single lines, and then having them fork where different trains within a system of trains diverged. And this was something that was completely new. Our idea of what the 1, 2, 3 or the 4, 5, 6 trains, that didn't exist prior to Tornak and Hertz. And what's kind of amazing about that is, typically when you're going into design, you kind of take the system for what it is and you try to make something that works within that system. But they managed to convince the MTA, and luckily there was funds available for them to fundamentally change how the subway system worked. They had grouped trains together, put them under different color codes, gave them different names. And that enabled the creation of this map. So that's effectively the map that's in place today. In 1998, they updated it to have some new information related to bus lines, ferry lines, and it's been in place since then. And I think that really speaks to the fact that in a lot of ways, this map works. What's kind of amazing, what I didn't know going into this project, is that the New York City subway map, our map here, is one of the only maps in the world that is geographic as opposed to diagrammatic, which I think is incredible. And it does speak to some of the cons of this approach, which is that clarity of the different train lines within a system and where exactly they diverge at stations and all of that. So that concept of the pros and cons, that never really went away. And in the intervening years, you know, Massimo Vignelli, Tornak, they actually had and held organized debates about the virtues of their different styles and approaches and maps. And then in 2008, after the documentary Helvetica came out, Men's Vogue actually reached out to Vignelli to see if he would revisit his subway map and kind of reignite this discussion and give him a chance to kind of, I think, create the version of the diagram that could really potentially stand the test of time. And he did. He updated the map in a couple of ways. For one, he got to benefit actually from those system updates that Tornak and Hertz implemented. So you can see that the color of the train lines, they changed from the left to the right, which made it a lot clearer because the system itself was a lot clearer. And then there was just kind of like some, you know, community feedback that he took into consideration. People really complained about the map on the left that all the bodies of water were muddy and brown. In the updated version, you know, they're kind of a light shade of blue. And he also kind of leaned further into the concept of a diagram and got rid of some major kind of geographic landmarks like the parks. So, and then of course, yeah, he also got the, you know, the bus lines and the airports in there as well, fully modernizing it. And he really kind of hoped that this redesign would kind of spark a comeback for the diagrammatic approach. And in a way it did. The MTA ended up using it for the Weekender, which is pictured here. They used this tool to kind of highlight weekend-specific service changes. And the diagram was really effective in doing that because it had the individual lines for them to be able to get into that level of detail and specificity. So all of this brings us basically to the beginning of our engagement with the MTA. We knew that one of the main challenges is that if you have a printed map, it's impossible to capture real-time service and really important alerts that users need to know about. And we kind of had this really solid idea about the pros and the cons of the diagram versus the geographic map. And that's kind of where we started.
Not many people haven't seen that, but we'd love to share with you tonight some of the ideas that we worked on before this final version. After learning all about the map and the diagram, we started concepting. And as a designer, we wanted to create something simple for the user. So we initially thought we could focus on individual lines. Our goal wasn't about building a complex map with curves and stations. We all know the maps can be confusing and hard to build. So we started designing and we got great concepts and no map. Our initial idea was around, tell us where you want to go and we will tell you how to get there. For this first one, we took the iconic circle and pair with a clock and the line, or you can get just the line closest to you using geolocation. So as you can see here on the screen, the idea was really simple. So we have a place at the bottom that you can tap, open the panel, you can type where you want to go, and then we're going to show exactly the lines, the stations that you're going to have in the middle of your way to your final destination. It was a really simple, really pure solution, really simple. So we had another idea, and this was like we call Guitar Hero, like a game. It was more a visualization of the train lines. We reimagined the station page using and also you added the moving trains, which we later incorporate this in this final version that we have. Also, this was the first concept that we brought the diagram. In this view, we have just an overview of all the concepts that we present to MTA. Our first meeting, we presented those 4 ideas, and they told us, We already have this on our app today. So this is just better designs. And also New Yorkers don't like to be told what to do. So MTA said, we need a map. So we got back and we're just like, let's try that. Let's try create a digital map. This is going to seem really simple and obvious, but it took a little bit of time to get there. Maybe it was our last week of work on the concept phase. We defined two principles, two rules that cannot be changed. The first one was we need to show the change of the service. And it was the most important feature for our map. But to show that, we need to show all the lines. We need to expose all the lines. People believe the most significant difference between Vignale's diagram on the left and the Hertz map was that one is geometric and another one is geographic. But it's actually the way that they treat the lines. Hertz map combines all the lines with the same colors, like they call the trunk line. What makes it harder to expose the issue for each one of the lines. For the diagram, it was like pretty easy to see what is happening in each one of the lines. So we need the diagram. For the second principle, we need the precise location to help the user to get exactly what they want to go. So we need the blue dot, the dot that we have in all app that is map based, like here on some examples. And then we're looking at both. We need both. How do you combine them? So we're happy that we're glad that we have great engineers like Robert to help us with that.
After many months of beautiful designs, it was time to start building. Now, as a coder, my first task was to prove this Vignale concept was technically achievable. At this point, we suspect we can do it, but MTA is a bit skeptical. MTA tells us, okay, however complex you imagine the subway system, it's 10 times that. Well, baby steps. First, let's see, can we draw a map of the subway? Using MTA's data, we build a prototype in an open source tool called Leaflet. We load the GPS coordinates of over 400 stations and connect them with tracks of colored lines. Then we hit the next big question. You see, subway maps, they always want to put the Manhattan grid straight up and down. In reality, Manhattan is rotated by 29 degrees. Can we rotate it? No. It turns out a map built in this Leaflet tool can't be rotated unless you tilt your laptop. So we bet on the wrong horse, or I did actually, and we toss Leaflet in the trash. It's only a week's work, no big deal. So then we rebuild the map using a different tool called Open Layers. This time it works. We get the map rotated. Everything is 29 degrees off kilter, so Manhattan can be straight. But then we notice some other problems. What's going on in the Rockaways? The A train, the blue line, it's looking a bit confused. It seems we have some learning to do. So MTA was right. There is so much complexity and nuance in how the subway operates. We really need at this point to educate ourselves on every single train line, the way the subsystem follows the contours and rhythms of the city. Thankfully, MTA gives us a ton of data to study. For example, this diagram teaches me that the A train has this branching pattern, only sometimes, where going east, you could end up in one of 3 terminal stations, Rockaway Park, Far Rockaway, or Ozone Park. So our code shouldn't assume there's one straight line from A to B. We have to draw all of these branches on the map. And then there's the mysterious Z train. Now, as I Google to figure out how the Z train works, I discover other people have questions like, does the Z train exist? I learned the answer is not really. On average, the Z train does not exist, but during rush hour, it materializes to run one way only. Who knew? Now here's an experiment where we turn the station names on a diagonal to squeeze in more text. We ended up not using this concept, but I love testing it on the M train. I never take the M, but it looks so cool on the map. Just wanted to show that. So at this point, we have a functional map, but no Vignelli style. We need to create visual building blocks with geometry and code. It's kind of like a puzzle game. You know, in Tetris, you're allowed just a few shapes and you have to fit them all together. So these Vignelli curves, they may look complex, but they're composed of a few key building blocks. The train tracks can only turn by 90 degrees or 45 degrees. The challenge is, how do we draw Vignelli style curves on an ever-changing map? Because the trains, they change routes between the day and the night and the weekend. Even during the day, a rush hour pattern looks really different than the midday pattern. So that means there's no way designers can draw every pattern of trains ahead of time. We have to calculate the Vignelli shapes on the fly. So we create this visual test. What you're seeing is every Vignelli puzzle piece calculated in real time to cover the distance between any 2 points in style. Now we have the Vignelli math figured out. The question is, will these shapes work on a geographical map? Can we take the realism of the Hertz map on the right and apply a Vignelli system to a map that's geographically accurate? Now here's a behind the scenes look at some of our computer code. Don't stare too long at it. But we have a secret map editing mode to change the Vignelli shapes on the map in real time. What I'm going to show you is a time lapse of me editing the map. I'm clicking on the subway tracks and one by one, switching the Vignelli shapes until the puzzle pieces fit together. So that's how we cleaned up Lower Manhattan. You're welcome. How about a bigger challenge, Atlantic Barclays? That's better. Almost there. Just a little more. Yes. Before, it's like random uncooked spaghetti. After, it's bellissimo Vignelli. And that's when we knew, yes, we can build this. In fact, let's tackle even more features.
Yeah, now that we know that it's possible to create the map, let's make this interactive. Here, you can see the combination of both maps. We have a simplified map when you zoom out, and showing more details when you zoom in. On the zoom out version, you can see the lines are combined. Curvier to match the nature, like Hertz map. And if you zoom in, you can see the lines getting separated, more geometric, and showing more information like Vignelli's diagram. Looking closer at the map, at the zoom levels, you'll see the moment that the lines get like separated. And also you can see more information that get in there. For example, on this one, you can see like the name of the stations, the streets, the avenue, and also like the river and other more information. And if you zoom even closer, you can see how we are adding the moving trains and other information, like the transfer lines, the entrance and the exit for each one of the station. But sometimes the station gets hidden behind the lines. So you created this feature called Peekaboo that we just make the lines transparent when you're zooming at the last level that we have in the map. So we don't want you to miss the entrance and the exit for each one of the stations. So here, just an example for that. This is the main feature that we have for the map, on this map. New York is a huge city that doesn't sleep. There is always something happening, and it was not different with the subway. Maintenance, constructions, and other chains. Most of those chains happens during the weekend or night. Can you imagine how hard it is for the night workers to get track of all the changes that happen at night, and for the tourists or for people that doesn't speak English and needs to read all the posters on the station? So there was a need for this dynamic and visual map that updates when the system updates. Here's a good example for that. So if you look at the left side, you have this navigation, and at the navigation have 3 tabs: one for now, one for tonight, and one weekend. And when you tap on tonight, you can see the map gets darker, and also the lines change if there is something happen. For example, if you look at the one, you can see it's a little bit lighter. It's because this line is not running right now. And for example, the 2, we have like these stripes. It's just a way to show you that this line is just going to one direction. And if you look at the dot, you're gonna see which direction it's going. And if you tap on the weekend, you're gonna see that changing again for a lighter version of the map, and also more chains like the R, the W, and also the 4, the 6. So there is a lot happening this weekend. So of course, this is not enough information. So for you to get even more information, we wanted to create a a way to filter the map. So we wanted to use, like, this is the cover of the map, the diagram, and we love that. So we had this idea to use this as a reference. So we imagine the color was a little bit different. So we created like a keyboard using that as a reference. So tap on the left icon here. You're gonna see the menu open, and it's showing all the lines. Here you cannot see that, but if you open if you open on live right now, you're gonna see sometimes the map, the line is blinking. It's to show you there is something happened there. And if you tap, and if you select one of the lines, like this one, it's the 5, you're gonna see now the other lines is still there. It's just as a reference for you to make sure you can get like the 2 other lines if you wanted to get transferred. And also we you can like keep on track like what is happening with your favorite lines. For example, for me, it was always the F, because the F was the one that I was using to go to work. So it's pretty easy and simple for you to select the line that you like most. Of course, there is some change that happens in specific stations, specific to the station. So we add this feature that if you tap one of the stations, you're gonna see the panel coming from the bottom. And if there is something happen there, like the elevator is not working, and there is like it's closed or something like that, or even if you wanted to see more time, the other train times, you can see that on that panel. So it's pretty simple as well. Just tap on the station and you're gonna get access to all the information related to that station. Also, it's pretty nice for if you are a person that is looking for the station that has elevators and also escalator, it's the station that is accessible. So we have this icon always there for you on the right side, and tapping on that, you highlight all the accessible station. So it's pretty simple. You can see that anytime. Just open the map and tap on that. You're gonna see. And if you tap on one of the stations with that icon, and if there is something happen with the elevator, escalator, we're gonna show that for you as well. And Of course, we wanted to create a great experience. No download needed. You can access from any device, and it's pretty easy for everyone. So it's web-based. You can just open the browser and tap and go to the map.
And so after all of that work, all of those insights, it finally came to a point where, we started need to have a discussion on when we were actually going to put this out to the public. And choosing when to launch the product really wasn't as straightforward as you might expect. Due to COVID and remote working, we weren't able to run the product through as many real-world tests as we'd liked, nor were we able to conduct as much user testing as we would have liked. That being said, COVID also provided us with some really strong motivation to try and get the map out in the world as soon as possible. The need for people to be able to plan their trips safely and have reliable information available to them was greater than ever before, and we felt like the digital subway map had a role in that. So in the fall of 2020, after about a year and 8 months or so of work, we decided to launch the map as a beta. And as a part of that launch, we were really lucky to work with the documentary filmmaker Gary Huswit on a short documentary film about the project. If you're interested in going further into the story that we shared today and hearing from our partners at the MTA, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's on Vimeo. And Gary actually, through his research for this documentary, he found some archival footage of those Vignelli and Tornak debates, and it inspired him to write a book. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the presentation, but I'm blanking on the name. We may be able to get it to maybe at the end. That's coming out soon, and I think between the two of those things, you're going to be able to get a lot of awesome information. So here's a quick, teaser of that film to give you just a little bit of an idea of what's it about.
There was this need for this dynamic living map that updates as the system updates and reflects New York as New York changes every day.
So a major aspect of creating and investing in the digital subway map is the future. Once you have this map as a foundation, it can be reworked and added to incrementally with relatively low lift. And we're approaching that future roadmap in a couple of different ways. So given that we put the map into the world as a beta, and before we had the chance to do as much testing as we planned, a major piece of what we're looking for is real life user feedback. So if you go to the map today, you'll see that we're still in that beta, and you'll be able to find feedback forms to be able to leave your thoughts with us. And one of the major themes that we've seen so far since the map has been live is that there are certain places where the map deviates just too far from geographic reality. And we had to make some geographic sacrifices for a couple of different reasons. One was that we really tried to make the map work by sticking to that Vignelli concept of only having lines curve at 45 and 90-degree angles. And outside of that, there's also certain parts of the city that are just so busy, they have so many lines and stations going through them, that to allow the map to be legible, we kind of had to move some things around as well. Now, that being said, and as a result of, I think, just the amount of feedback that we're getting that those deviations in some cases are just way too big, we're actually actively looking into ways to improve that and looking into ways to maybe potentially support variations in how the lines curves and change so that we can take care of some, major, deviations from reality, like having trains actually go over the Manhattan Bridge. So definitely, please go check out the map, look for those links, and leave all your feedback and thoughts, because we are definitely looking to hear what we can do better here. So beyond the user feedback, sometimes, life just demonstrates some obvious needs and obvious opportunities to update the map. And that was definitely the case when it came to COVID and the rollout of vaccines. As soon as the announcement came out that vaccines would begin to be rolled out in New York City, the MTA reached back to us to see if there was any way that we could leverage the digital subway map. And thanks to help from the city, we were able to leverage their up-to-date data to populate our map with vaccination site location. So within a matter of weeks, we were able to design and implement a system for surfacing vaccine locations across the map. And I think this really illustrates, it's a testament to how important it is to have a strong design system and really great technology behind it, because we were able to add more information to the map without distracting from its core purpose as serving as a tool to illustrate the MTA subway system. So as more detailed vaccine information becomes available, our map is able to surface that directly to you. And the list of vaccine sites that are available throughout the city has been constantly updating since we launched this, thanks to that data from the city. And finally, there is, of course, the broader world of MTA's services and data that are really interesting opportunities to improve this map. There's the bus lines, Metro North, the ferry, everything works in concert. And hopefully one day, this map in the future will be able to support illustrating all of those different systems and how they interconnect within the digital subway map. So we're so thankful to the MTA for the opportunity to be able to work on this iconic part of New York City. And we really do hope that all of you check out the digital subway map and share your feedback. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear our story today. And like we said before, a huge motivation for launching this map was to gather user feedback. So hopefully we can actually start tackling some of that feedback that you all have today as part of our Q&A. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it back to Kendra to kick that off.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. This presentation was amazing. I learned so much, and I hope you all did too. Now it's time for our Q&A. So if you haven't already, please enter your questions into the Q&A function, and I will read from that. But to kick it off, I would love to know, how long did the project take overall? And was that longer or shorter than you expected?
So I think I'll jump into that one. I think it ended up taking, I think I mentioned before, something like 18 months or about a year, 8 months, which we knew it was going to be complicated, but we didn't expect it was going to take that long. And, there's still so much that we wish we could have worked on. But the truth is, I think we were really happy with what we were able to. The map, is definitely more than a minimal viable product. We needed to get something to New Yorkers that was usable, and that just ended up being the time that it took.
I was muted, sorry about that. Let's see. So a question for Robert. What hurdles did you face integrating the MTA's data into your code, particularly the real-time data?
Right. So I sense that perhaps Mark, who asked the question, might be a programmer. So I'll allow a little bit of that in my answer. So there was sometimes this tension between, MTA had these old legacy data sources, and they wanted us to use their bleeding edge new data source that they just finished, or they're pretty sure that it worked. The older data source, for instance, for the service changes, it had SOAP XML as the schema. It's a little bit, annoying to parse it, but the thing is, it had more features and more details on, when stuff was closed and rerouted and things for service changes. Whereas they had a nice sparkly JSON data source that they just built, but it didn't have all the same features as the old one. And so we had some times of going back and forth between them to find out, what was really ready to launch with. Or another interesting data source it's called Pattern Graph. So Pattern Graph MTA provided, it was really great for having real-time patterns of where the trains are actually going. So it was helpful. That's where that diagram of the A train that was branching, that's where that came from. Thing is, pattern graph, it just doesn't tell you where a train is going through a station without stopping. It just tells you where it stops. So we're trying to like base, our drawing of the map on pattern graph, but it doesn't tell us, oh, the A train, it goes through these, these 3 stations without stopping, and then it stops at this next one. It just tells us where it stops. And so we have to kind of like figure out where to send the train on the map. So that, yeah, was quite a challenge. So like there was really great engineering on all these data sources, but it's when you first have, other people try to use your API, then you discover like, oh, we didn't account for every kind of scenario that they need to use it.
Great, thank you. A lot of folks are asking, like, will there be like an app just for this map? Like, when's it available for download? You mentioned it's in beta, and someone asked, what does beta mean? So if you guys can just quickly mention that.
I can talk a little bit about that. So it's not an app. We are trying to, as we were saying, try to make this easy, really easy for everyone to have access. So you can go to mta.info, and then you can just access from anywhere. And beta, as we were saying before, is just like our way. We wanted to hear from everyone. So we wanted to make this better. And of course, it's there. If you go there, you have a link to get feedback. So you type what you want to say. We want to try to make this better. And that's why we want to keep this in beta until we get like in a better place.
Great. And can you remind everybody where they can leave their feedback? I know you mentioned there was like a link.
Yes, there is a link at the bottom right. With the about the accessibility, everything is at the bottom right. You can go there and type, just click, and I'm gonna open a form that you can enter the information.
Yeah, and on mobile, if you use that keyboard that Karina was talking about, it'll be in the bottom of that keyboard.
Exactly.
Great. The bottom right of what? So just someone just asking the chat.
If you go in your browser and type the map, map.mta.info, you're gonna see the map, and there is like links at the bottom, and then you can click on that, and you're gonna see the form. But on mobile, when you tap on the menu, you can see the links at the bottom as well, and you can see feedback there. You can tap and enter our feedback.
Great. Thank you. And someone asked, does it work underground? I suspect that it does.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure it works, like, and you're gonna see like sometimes a message just showing like it's not live, like you're gonna be in like when you get back to Wi-Fi and then the internet, you're gonna change like for the real data, but it's gonna work. We can see like everything on the ground for sure.
Great. And I'm curious to know what's next for the live map. Like, what should we look out for? Someone asked, will there be updates for the Staten Island Railway? Are there plans to kind of integrate these other transportation systems to get us to and from the city?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest opportunities that the MTA and we're aware of, and it's definitely the plan. It's just a question of when. Right.
Awesome. Well, if there are no more questions, I think. Oh, someone asked about a live bus map, but as you said, Nick, it's all about when. I think everything is unfolding in time for sure. Okay. All right. So Nick, if you want to go back to that very last slide, that would be awesome.
All right.
So
if there are no more questions. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you to everyone that I saw that there's a lot of people from around the world, like Brazil, like I'm from Brazil. So I'm excited to see so many people there, like from a lot of places. It's amazing to see a lot of people comment as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Yes, it's one of my great joys doing these virtual programs virtually, is that folks join us from all around the world. And so we'll continue to do so. All right, if there are no more questions, thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and have a great evening. And if you want to know more about the museum's programs, check us out at nytransitmuseum.org. We also have a family benefit coming up called Party on Wheels. And so more information is also on our website. So thank you so much to Robert, Karina, and Nick for a wonderful presentation, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.